I thought the sound of wrapping paper would feel cheerful that night. It was Christmas Eve, and the living room glowed with colored lights and the faint scent of cinnamon candles. My mother-in-law sat in her usual armchair at the center of everything, the matriarch surveying her kingdom. One by one, she opened her gifts with a delicate precision, peeling tape, smoothing the paper as though each box were a sacred ritual. Laughter bubbled around her. Someone passed hot cocoa. Someone else took photos. For a moment, I almost believed this was what family was supposed to feel like. Then it was gone. Not the laughter, not the cocoa. My gift. The one I had wrapped myself, with silver paper and a bow that matched the tree. It should have been on the pile, waiting its turn, a small symbol that I belonged here. But when she reached the end of the stack, my box was nowhere. I felt my chest tighten. She set the last ribbon aside, smiled faintly, and moved on as if nothing had happened. No one said a word. My pulse thudded in my ears. I kept my face still, training myself not to show anything. A sip of cocoa, a small smile, a quiet nod. The trick of surviving in this house was silence. If I asked, she would say she never saw it. If I pressed, she would tilt her head and sigh, and everyone else would defend her. Better to act like I had simply forgotten to bring something. Better to swallow the heat rising in my throat. What I didn't expect was that the truth would not stay hidden. I had walked into the house earlier that evening with 2 bags. One filled with food I had cooked all morning, a sweet potato casserole and a pecan pie. The other bag carried the gift. I remembered placing it on the coffee table, the same table now covered with empty bows and discarded paper. I remembered because she gave me that look, the look that flicked across her face when she saw my contribution. Half surprise, half irritation, as though generosity from me was out of place. Still, I told myself not to dwell. Tonight was supposed to be warm, peaceful, maybe even healing. My husband sat beside me, smiling politely as his younger brother cracked jokes about ugly sweaters. My father-in-law poured himself another drink and complimented the roast. I watched the twinkle lights blink on and off, and I thought, maybe it will be fine. Maybe this year, I will simply exist without being tested. But when the pile of gifts shrank to nothing and my silver box had vanished, reality cut sharp. It was the same old script. A missing gift was not an accident. It was a message. I told myself to stay calm. Smile. Observe. The room felt too warm suddenly, the fire in the hearth pushing heat against my skin. I excused myself for a moment, stepping into the kitchen under the pretense of checking the pie. My hands trembled as I opened the oven, though it was empty. I gripped the counter until my knuckles whitened. Breathe, I reminded myself. Breathe. The kitchen smelled of cloves and roasting meat. A single plate with crumbs sat abandoned on the counter, as if someone had sneaked a snack before dinner. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. In that stillness, I let the shock settle into something colder. I remembered other nights, other small vanishings. A necklace of mine misplaced, until weeks later I found it in the trash. A photograph where my face had been cut off at the edge of the frame. Subtle, deniable acts, always leaving me doubting my own memory. I straightened my shoulders and returned to the living room. My mother-in-law was laughing at something my sister-in-law said, her hand resting on a pile of opened boxes like trophies. She glanced at me only once, her smile perfectly measured. I sat down quietly, but inside, I was already piecing things together. The gift had not simply disappeared. It had been removed. The memory of wrapping it came back vividly. I had chosen the silver paper because she always insisted gold was her color, so I thought silver might soften the contrast. I had tucked in a handwritten card, something small but thoughtful. A scarf woven with the shade of blue she liked to wear to church. Simple, respectful, nothing extravagant. I had wanted no more than a nod of approval, a passing acknowledgement that I existed in this family. Now it was gone. I looked around the room. My brother-in-law was showing his wife a new watch. My husband leaned back, pretending not to notice the tension on my face. The children played with their toys near the tree, and in the middle she sat, serene, queen of her small empire. My absence, my effort erased, was invisible to them. I smiled. Not because I felt happy, because the smile was armor. I sipped my cocoa, and let the warmth coat my throat, masking the lump that threatened to rise. If they thought I would cry, they would be disappointed. If they thought I would beg for recognition, they would be mistaken. It struck me then how practiced this had become. The silence, the composure, the act of vanishing without leaving my seat. Years of training under her gaze had taught me well. But tonight, as the fire cracked and another round of laughter swelled, I felt something different stir in me. Not resignation, resolve. Because missing gifts do not stay hidden forever. Later, I would recall the exact moment the decision hardened inside me. It was not when I saw the empty table, not when I watched her brush off the last bow. It was when she leaned toward my father-in-law and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch. Some people forget to bring anything and then expect gratitude. My hand clenched around the mug, the ceramic edge bit into my palm. I smiled wider, a mask of calm, and placed the mug gently on the side table. Then I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Not because I had accepted the insult, because I knew something they didn't. I knew where I had left the gift. I knew the truth was waiting, just out of sight, ready to be revealed. And when it came out, it would not be me who stood small in that room. It would be her. The party carried on as if nothing had happened. Wrapping paper still littered the carpet like confetti. Someone turned on holiday music, soft carols drifting in from a speaker on the mantel. My husband leaned toward me and asked quietly if I wanted more cocoa. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. The missing gift pulsed in my mind like a secret no one else could hear. I watched my mother-in-law chat with her sister, her hand fluttering as she recounted some story. She looked perfectly at ease, perfectly untouchable, but that calm smile only sharpened my resolve. She believed she had erased me with a simple act, a sleight of hand hidden behind family cheer. She had no idea I was already tracing the edges of her trick. I excused myself again, claiming I needed to check the pie. No one questioned it. In this house, I was often invisible, and invisibility can be useful. The kitchen was quiet, just the steady tick of the clock and the muffled chorus from the living room. I opened the pantry, then the cupboards, moving carefully so no clattering jar would betray me. On the second shelf behind a stack of paper plates, I found the silver edge of wrapping paper. My pulse spiked. I reached in and pulled the box free. There it was, my gift, shoved out of sight like something shameful. The bow was bent. A corner of the paper had ripped. I turned it over in my hands, anger and sadness tangling in my chest. She hadn't just hidden it. She had tried to erase me, and assumed no one would notice. I stood there a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The logical thing would have been to return quietly to my seat, slip the box into my bag, and carry the insult alone like I always did. But tonight was different. Tonight I felt a sharpness I had not allowed myself before. I carried the gift back into the living room. The chatter faltered when they saw me holding it. My sister-in-law's eyes widened slightly. My husband shifted in his chair. My mother-in-law's smile froze, just for an instant, before she smoothed it back into place. "You dropped this," I said evenly, placing the box on the coffee table in front of her. A hush settled. She blinked, then gave a small laugh, the kind people use when they want to dissolve tension without admitting guilt. "Oh, I must have misplaced it while organizing." My husband looked at her, then at me. The others glanced between us. No one spoke. I felt my hands tremble, but kept my posture still. "Strange place to organize," I replied, my tone calm. "Behind paper plates in the pantry." The room tightened. Her sister set down her drink. The children stopped their game near the tree. My mother-in-law's eyes flickered, a flash of something sharp before she shrugged. It must have been a mix-up, but her voice was thinner now. I sat back down without another word. The box remained on the table, unopened, a silent witness. For the rest of the evening, laughter sounded forced, as if everyone was performing lines from a script no one believed anymore. Later, when plates of pie were passed around, she finally unwrapped the box. She pulled out the scarf, the soft blue fabric, catching the light. She held it for a beat, then set it aside without comment. The absence of gratitude was louder than any insult. I did not push for thanks. I didn't need it. Because I had seen the way the others shifted in their seats, the way silence spoke louder than her denial. Something had cracked. When the night ended and coats were gathered, she hugged everyone at the door with her polished smile. When it was my turn, she leaned in and whispered, "You really shouldn't make a scene." Her perfume was sharp, floral with a bitter note. I pulled back and met her eyes. "I didn't make a scene," I said softly. "I just found what was mine." Her expression flickered again, the faintest loss of control. Then the smile returned. She turned to the next guest, pretending nothing had passed between us. On the drive home, the car was quiet. My husband kept his eyes on the road. After a long silence, he said, "I saw where you found it." His knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. "She shouldn't have done that." I waited, wondering if he would defend her as he often did, with excuses about stress or forgetfulness. But he didn't. He shook his head. "I don't know why she does this to you, but tonight, she showed everyone who she really is." The words settled in me like a small ember of warmth. I stared out at the passing lights, Christmas decorations glowing in front yards, and for the first time in years, I felt less alone. Back home, I placed the empty gift box on our dining table. The silver paper was wrinkled, the bow crushed, but I didn't throw it away. It felt like evidence, proof that my reality was not imagined, proof that I had not been erased. I thought about all the times I had doubted myself, replaying her comments in my head until I wondered if I was too sensitive. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it was just bad timing. But tonight had stripped away those doubts. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. The scarf might be forgotten in a drawer by tomorrow. The box might be recycled. But the silence in that room, when I placed the gift on the table, would not vanish so easily. It had carved a fracture in the story she told about herself, the story of the gracious matriarch. I sat there for a long time after my husband went to bed. The house was quiet, just the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I ran my hand over the wrinkled silver paper, tracing the lines like scars. What she didn't realize was that every small cut, every erased gesture, every missing gift had been training me, teaching me patience, teaching me how to hold steady until the moment came to show the truth. And tonight, even though she tried to bury it, I had uncovered more than a scarf in a box. I had uncovered the beginning of her unraveling. The next morning, I woke with the faint smell of smoke still clinging to my hair. Not from a fire, but from the fireplace in her living room. It lingered like a reminder, sharp and impossible to ignore. My husband was already up, pouring coffee in the kitchen. He didn't mention the night before, and neither did I, but the silence was heavy. I sat at the table, wrapping my hands around the mug he placed in front of me. The steam rose in soft spirals, and I stared at it as if it could answer the questions spinning in my head. Why did she keep doing this? Why did she always choose me as the target? This wasn't the first time, not even close. The missing gift was just another notch on a long, invisible tally. Years of small humiliations stacked neatly one on top of the other until the weight pressed against my chest. I thought back to the first Christmas I spent with them. It was almost 10 years ago, before I was even married. I had been so eager to impress, to show them I wanted to belong. I spent hours baking gingerbread cookies, arranging them in a tin with ribbon. When I presented it, she barely looked up. "We already have plenty of cookies," she said, sliding the tin aside. Later that night, I found it in the trash, still wrapped. I remembered another time, a summer barbecue in their backyard. The air had been thick with the smell of grilled burgers and sunscreen. I wore a sundress, one I had chosen carefully because I knew she liked bright colors. When I stepped onto the patio, she glanced at me and muttered just loud enough for the others to hear, "That dress is a bit much, don't you think?" Laughter followed, not from humor, but from discomfort. I pretended I didn't hear. My husband squeezed my hand under the table, but he didn't say a word. Even small gestures became weapons. Once, at Thanksgiving, I brought a pumpkin pie from a bakery downtown, the kind with flaky crust and just the right balance of spice. She took one bite, set her fork down, and said, "Too sweet." Then she leaned across the table to compliment her daughter-in-law's pie instead. I smiled, swallowed the sting, and served myself another slice, as though sugar were the only problem. The pattern was always the same. I gave, she dismissed. I tried, she erased. And the family, whether out of loyalty or fear, followed her lead. They laughed when she mocked, nodded when she dismissed, and stayed quiet when I disappeared from the picture. But last night had been different. Last night, I had placed the truth in the middle of the room. For a brief moment, the mask slipped, and everyone saw what I had always seen. That was what made it dangerous. I sipped my coffee and thought of her words at the door. "You really shouldn't make a scene." The irony made me laugh quietly, though it wasn't funny. She had made the scene, not me. She had hidden the gift, not me. I had only pulled it back into the light. The day stretched on quietly, but inside, I replayed everything. Each slight from the past, each whispered insult. They weren't isolated events. They were a pattern, a design. And for the first time, I wondered if she knew exactly what she was doing all along. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister-in-law lit up the screen. "I don't know what happened last night, but Mom seemed really upset. Maybe just let it go." Let it go. The phrase stabbed deeper than she realized. For years, that had been the unspoken rule. Let it go. Let her win. Let the silence cover everything. I typed back slowly. I didn't do anything except find what was mine. Then I set the phone down and left it unanswered when the dots appeared, then vanished. It was late when I finally admitted to myself that I couldn't keep pretending. The memory of her smirk at the barbecue, her dismissal of my pie, the discarded gingerbread, all of it pressed against me. The missing gift wasn't an accident. It was the latest chapter in a book she'd been writing for years, and I had been a character trapped in her story, waiting for approval that would never come. I stood by the window, staring at the streetlights glowing outside. Snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting under the lamplight. The world looked peaceful, but inside me, something shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was tired. Tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of believing silence would ever earn me a place. When I turned back toward the table, the empty gift box still sat there. Wrinkled silver paper, crushed bow, a mute witness to years of erasure. I placed my hand on it and whispered to myself, "No more." Because this wasn't just about a gift. It was about every time she had told me without words that I didn't belong. Every time she had smiled while cutting me out of the frame. Every time I had let it slide to keep the peace. The scarf she unwrapped would be folded away somewhere, forgotten. But the moment she slipped, the moment the room went silent, that was mine to keep. It was the first crack in the story she had built. And I knew, deep in my chest, it wouldn't be the last. The following week moved slowly, but tension clung to every hour. My husband and I tried to carry on with our normal routines. We went to work, cooked dinners, folded laundry, and pretended the night of the missing gift was just another holiday memory. But the silence around it was louder than any argument. I found myself thinking about that silver box at odd times. In the grocery store while reaching for apples, in the car while waiting at a red light, even while brushing my teeth at night. It haunted me, not because of the scarf, but because of the certainty it carried. I knew she had taken it. I knew she had hidden it. And worse, I knew she would do it again. The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon. My husband looked at his phone and frowned. "Mom wants us to come over this Saturday for dinner," he said. He read the message aloud. "She says it will be a small gathering, just family. Just family." The words cut like glass. I asked him if he wanted to go. He hesitated, then nodded. "We should. It'll look worse if we don't." So Saturday evening we drove over. Snow clung to the curbs, dirty and half melted. The house glowed with warm lights, wreaths still hanging on the door, though Christmas had passed. Inside, the air smelled of garlic and roasted chicken. Laughter floated from the dining room. I walked in with my head high, determined not to shrink this time. She greeted us at the door with a polished smile, kissing my husband's cheek, then turning to me with the same expression she might offer a polite stranger. "You made it," she said, her tone flat beneath the cheer. Dinner began with chatter, wine glasses clinking, stories told too loudly. I pushed food around my plate, barely tasting it. She sat at the head of the table, her presence like a conductor guiding the rhythm of the room. Every laugh, every nod seemed to wait for her cue. Then it happened. My sister-in-law mentioned the Christmas gifts, laughing about how her husband had already broken the gadget she received. My mother-in-law chuckled, then casually said, "Well, At least everyone got something thoughtful this year. Her eyes flicked to me for a second, just long enough to slice. The table went quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't natural. My fork froze in my hand. I could feel my husband stiffen beside me. I set the fork down gently, the sound sharp against the plate. Everyone did, I said evenly. Including me. I gave you something too. Do you remember? Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Oh, that. Yes, of course. A scarf, wasn't it? Yes, I said, holding her gaze. The one you hid in the pantry behind the paper plates. The words dropped heavy in the room. My brother-in-law coughed. My sister-in-law shifted uncomfortably. My father-in-law looked down at his wine. She laughed softly, a brittle sound. I don't know what you're talking about. Why would I hide a gift? That's ridiculous. Because you've done it before, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Maybe not with gifts, but with other things. Comments, pictures, little acts to make me disappear. But this time everyone saw it. Her cheeks flushed, though her smile stayed frozen. You're being dramatic. I leaned forward, my hands steady on the table. Number, I'm being honest. And I'm done pretending. When? The silence stretched. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the crackle of the fire in the next room. My heart hammered, but my voice did not shake. Finally, she placed her napkin on the table. I think you're imagining things, she said quietly, though her eyes blazed. You've always been too sensitive. I almost laughed. Sensitive. The word she had used for years to dismiss me. I let it hang in the air, then said, maybe. Or maybe I'm the only one willing to tell the truth. The room seemed to tilt, as though everyone else had been holding their breath. My husband cleared his throat, his voice firm for the first time. I saw it too, Mom. Her head snapped toward him, shock flashing across her face. You, what? I saw where she found it, he said, his jaw tight. It was hidden. You know it. I know it. Everyone here knows it. Gasps circled the table. My sister-in-law's fork clattered onto her plate. My father-in-law muttered something under his breath and pushed his chair back. For the first time in years, I felt the weight shift. The silence wasn't mine to carry anymore. She opened her mouth, searching for words, but nothing came. Her authority cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. I picked up my glass of water, took a sip, and placed it back down. My voice was steady when I said, all I ever wanted was to be part of this family, but if being part of it means erasing myself, then maybe I don't belong here after all. The room broke into murmurs. My sister-in-law looked at me with something like sympathy. My brother-in-law kept his eyes on his plate. My husband reached under the table and squeezed my hand. She sat rigid, her napkin still folded neatly, her smile gone now. The queen had been dethroned, if only for a moment. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just about me. It was about all of them too. The ones who had stayed silent, the ones who had laughed along. By exposing her, I had forced them all to see the truth they had ignored for years. Dinner ended quickly after that. Plates clattered, chairs scraped. Goodbyes were muttered without warmth. She didn't look at me as we left. In the car, the night outside was dark and sharp with cold. My husband drove in silence, then finally said, I'm proud of you. And I stared out the window at the blur of streetlights. For the first time in years, my chest felt lighter. The war wasn't over, but the first battle had been won. And I knew deep down, she would not forget what happened at that table. Neither would I. The drive home that night should have felt like relief. The winter air outside the car was crisp, the sky clear, dotted with cold stars. Yet inside, my chest was tight. My husband's words echoed in my head. I saw it too, Mom. For the first time, he had stepped out of her shadow. But I also knew that a storm was brewing. People like her did not surrender quietly. The next morning proved me right. My phone buzzed before breakfast. A message from my sister-in-law appeared. Mom is furious. She says you embarrassed her in front of everyone. Embarrassed. That was the word she chose. Not dishonest, not cruel. Embarrassed. As if my uncovering the truth was worse than her hiding it. I set the phone down and poured coffee, hands trembling only slightly. By noon, the calls began. My father-in-law left a voicemail, his tone stern. We don't air family matters at the dinner table. You should apologize. Then came a string of messages from her, each one colder than the last. I don't know what you think you proved. This family does not need your drama. If you want to stay married to my son, you will learn your place. I read them in silence, my jaw tight. My husband walked into the kitchen, saw my face, and asked, "What did she say now?" I handed him the phone. His eyes darkened as he scrolled. He didn't say much, just set the phone down and muttered, "Unbelievable." That evening, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, my mother-in-law stood there, her coat buttoned to her neck, her lipstick sharp as a blade. My father-in-law trailed behind her, his face tight. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "We need to talk," she said. The living room felt colder somehow. She sat on the couch like a queen reclaiming her throne, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "You humiliated me," she began. "In front of my family, in front of my children, in my own home." I stayed standing, my arms crossed. "You humiliated yourself. I didn't hide that gift. You did." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you hear yourself? You are imagining things. You always twist everything. You've been trying to turn my son against me since the day you married him." My husband stepped forward, his voice steady. "Mom, I saw it with my own eyes. She found the gift in the pantry. Stop pretending it didn't happen." For a moment, the mask slipped. Her mouth opened, then closed. A flash of anger flared in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself, smoothing her coat. "You've poisoned him," she said to me, her voice sharp. "You filled his head with lies." "No," I said quietly. "You did that all on your own." The silence stretched until my father-in-law finally spoke. "Enough. We are not discussing this anymore. What's done is done. Let's move forward." But his words carried no weight. Everyone in the room knew nothing was finished. After they left, the air in the house felt heavier, like smoke that refused to clear. My husband sat beside me on the couch, rubbing his temples. "This isn't going to stop," he said. He was right. The fallout spread quickly. Relatives who hadn't even been at dinner began texting. Some asked questions cautiously. Others repeated her version of events. "Why would you attack her like that? She said you ruined Christmas on purpose." It must have been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That word rang in my ears. It was always the excuse, the shield she used. But I had the box. I had the memory of pulling it from the pantry with my own hands. There was no misunderstanding. Days later, she escalated. She posted on Facebook. A vague message, but pointed enough. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down. Some people forget the meaning of loyalty. Comments flooded in. Support from friends who knew only her polished surface. Sympathy for the woman who painted herself as a victim. I read it, my stomach twisting. She wanted to control the narrative. She wanted to turn the world against me. That night, my husband suggested something I hadn't expected. "We should document everything," he said. "Every message, every voicemail. If she keeps this up, we might need it." I looked at him, surprised. "You think it could come to that?" He nodded. "She thrives in shadows. But if we shine a light, she loses power." So I saved the messages. I recorded the voicemails. I even took a photo of the crushed silver bow still sitting in the trash can, the last physical trace of that night. The next time she called, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was sharp, trembling with fury. "You don't know who you're messing with. Families talk. People will hear about this. You'll regret what you've done." I saved that too. The confrontation had split the family. Some avoided us altogether, unsure which side to take. Others whispered their support in private, too afraid to say it aloud. But the lines had been drawn. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fight. Because this wasn't just about a missing gift anymore. It was about control, about truth, about refusing to be erased. She could call me dramatic. She could spin her stories. She could try to turn the world against me. But I had the evidence. I had my husband's voice beside mine. And most of all, I had the strength she never expected me to find. The storm had arrived, and she had lit it herself. And deep down, I knew she would regret it. The weeks that followed felt like living in two separate worlds. On the surface, life carried on. Work deadlines, grocery runs, the quiet rhythm of daily chores. But underneath, the tension with my mother-in-law simmered like a pot left on low heat. I never knew when it would boil over again. Her messages slowed but didn't stop. Some were sharp, dripping with accusation. Others were quiet, almost pitiful, reminding me that family should forgive. Each one went straight into the folder on my phone, labeled Evidence. My husband and I agreed. If she tried to twist this further, we would not be caught unprepared. Then, one afternoon, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't her. It was a police officer, standing tall in uniform, his expression neutral. He handed me a notice. A report had been filed. My mother-in-law claimed harassment. I felt the room tilt for a second. She had escalated further than I expected. I showed the officer the messages, the voicemails, the threats she had left. He studied them, nodding slowly. "This paints a very different picture," he said. "If you'd like to file a counter-report, now's the time." My hands trembled, but I signed the paperwork. I wasn't doing it out of revenge. I was doing it because I refused to let her own the story anymore. News spread quickly through the family. My sister-in-law called. Her voice hushed. "She's saying you're trying to destroy her reputation, but..." I saw the look on her face that night. "I know she hid it. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. A crack in the wall of silence that had always surrounded her. When the legal dust settled, the police didn't pursue her complaint. Instead, they warned her to stop contacting me in threatening ways. She must have hated that. Losing control, losing the illusion that she could twist everything into her favor. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Still, I knew scars remained. Family gatherings became smaller, more fractured. She avoided me when she could. When she couldn't, she put on her polished smile and spoke as little as possible. My father-in-law looked at me differently now, not with warmth, but with a kind of wary respect, like he wasn't sure what I might do next. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply existed, steady and calm. One afternoon, I took the scarf I had given her out of my closet. She had returned it to me in silence, leaving it in a paper bag on my porch. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric. It wasn't about the scarf itself. It was about what it represented. Erasure, dismissal, and finally, defiance. So I made a choice. I wore it. To work. To the grocery store. On walks through the neighborhood. Every time the fabric brushed against my skin, it reminded me of that night. Of the moment I refused to disappear. Months passed, and something surprising happened. Relatives who had stayed quiet began reaching out. A cousin messaged me on Facebook saying, "I always thought she was harsh with you. I'm glad you finally stood up." An aunt pulled me aside at a baby shower, whispering, "She's done this to others too," but no one ever confronted her. It was like pulling a thread. Once one person spoke, more followed. Her power had always been built on silence, and silence was breaking. At home, my husband and I grew stronger. For years, her shadow had stretched over us, shaping his choices, his words. But now, he seemed freer. He laughed more. He reached for my hand without hesitation. One night, over takeout and wine, he said, "You know, I used to think keeping peace with her was the only way. But you showed me peace isn't real if it costs you yourself." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Eventually, another holiday came. Easter this time. We were invited, though the message carried no warmth. I hesitated, but my husband said, "Let's go." Not for her, for us. So we did. When we arrived, the house was filled with the smell of ham and baked rolls. The dining room buzzed with conversation. She sat at the head of the table as always, but her smile seemed tighter, her presence smaller. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away. I sat tall, shoulders back, and smiled politely. I wasn't there to fight. I was there to exist fully, without shrinking. When dessert was served, my niece handed me a slice of pie and whispered, "I like when you're here." My throat tightened. A simple sentence, but it meant everything. Later that night, as we drove home, I rolled down the window. The spring air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blossoms. I let it fill my lungs. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn a place at her table. All the times I had swallowed my voice to keep the peace. And I realized something. Belonging isn't given by people who want to erase you. Belonging is claimed when you refuse to vanish. The scarf still hung in my closet. The silver paper was long gone, the bow thrown away, but the lesson remained. She may never change. She may never admit what she did. But I changed. I found a strength I didn't know I had. And I wondered, as I looked out at the passing lights, if she realized what she had lost. Not a scarf, not a gift. She had lost the power to silence me,